Here we are dealing with the public page of a knowledge base which shows the preview of an article, and this article belongs to a particular category. In the left sidebar, we can see the list of categories, and each of the category, when expanded, will show the list of articles which belong to that particular category. When we click on a particular article from this list, the corresponding preview of that article is shown over here. Technically speaking, the left sidebar is composed of an accordion, and each of the category is an item within the accordion. Here the accordion and the related UI components have been directly imported from the Neato UI library. Although everything looks great right now, there is a minor issue when we are clicking on the article from the left sidebar. So let's say we click on this particular article from the left sidebar. When we click on that, we immediately see the preview of that article. But the problem is that the left sidebar has closed itself. It was in an expanded state. Now it has closed. So this is a bad UX because right now we will have to look into where exactly or under which category this particular article belongs to, and we will have to navigate to that particular category and again continue further into the next articles within that category. So if the particular category wasn't closed by itself, then if it was in the expanded state, then we could see which article we are dealing with right now. In order to fix this issue, first we need to understand why this issue is occurring in the first place. So if we try this out from the UI, we can see that it's almost like the whole component is getting re-rendered. But that's only our assumption. We have to make sure that this is the actual course, and that's why this particular accordion item is getting closed on its own. So we could traverse through the whole code base and figure out if the accordion is actually getting re-rendered or the left sidebar is actually getting re-rendered or not. But there are better ways to reach a conclusion. And one among the tools that helps us in finding what has caused the re-rendering and to profile how each of the component in a page is getting rendered or how much time it takes is to use the React DevTools. It's officially released by the React developer team, and all we need to do is just install the extension in say via Chrome or via Firefox. And then we just need to go to the extension settings and allow access to file URLs. After that, we can directly enable this particular, access this particular tool whenever we are in the development mode of an application. So right now, in my extensions, we can see that the React Developer Tools has access to this particular site. Now let us see how we can actually utilize this tool. Once we have enabled the extension from the extensions dropdown, next step is to open the inspector. Once it is opened, towards the very end, there will be two tabs called Components and Profiler. So let's start by looking into what the Components tab is. So the Components tab essentially shows the whole hierarchy of how the components are structured within this particular page. It starts from the root point, and we can see all the components from that end towards rendering this page. So if we need to get an idea about how this particular page is structured, we can see that there is an EUI component, which is essentially end user interface component. And this component has several routes which are designed using React Router DOM. And there is a preview component, and the preview component has a sidebar. And what else? And it has a route for the article view. So that's how the components are organized right now. More than understanding how the components are organized, we can also use this components tab to see what all are the props and what all are the states which this particular component deals with. So let's take article view. So in article view, we can see several information in the right sidebar over here. We can see what all are the props passed to it. We can see that an article prop is passed to it. And we can also see other information like what exactly or what components rendered this particular component. So this was rendered by component and the router.consumer and preview and end user interface and app. Similarly, if we go to some other component, let's say EUI component, we can see again the props and the hooks over here. Inside the hooks, we can see that what all states have been declared. So here redirect to login is having a value of false. This is very helpful when we are trying to find what exactly is the value of the state when the UI is rendered. And more than that, it's very helpful when we are dealing with forms, especially formic forms, and to see what exactly is the value that's held by the formic context. Another important tab that the React Developer Tools provides us is this Profiler tab. So when we click on it, we can see that there are three different sections here. First is the flame graph, second is the ranked chart, and third is the timeline. We won't be discussing about timeline, but we will be focusing on flame graph and rank chart. So let's start with the flame graph chart. In simple terms, the Profiler tab helps us in understanding how each of the component got rendered and how much time it took to render when we are performing a particular action in the UI. So let us try and debug the actual issue at hand. So let me just move this to the side. Now first we need to start the profiling. But before that, let me just interact with the UI and keep this in an expanded state and select the first article maybe. Yeah. So this is to ensure that we only profile the very necessary actions from the UI. Right now, the main issue is that when we have already selected an article, then and if the category is in the expanded state, then when we click on another article, the category or the accordion closes by itself. That's what we want to debug. So let's keep it in a state where all the other actions have been done. Now let's start profiling and let's go to the UI. Then let's just click on another article. Now that is done. Now let's stop profiling. So when we stop profiling, we can see the flame graph, which shows us how each of the component got rendered and what exactly has happened in each of the component. So let us go through the graph. So when we hover on top of each of the components shown over here, we can see the particular component or the section within the page where that component is rendered is getting highlighted. That is actually pretty helpful, and it helps us in understanding where exactly is this component getting rendered. More than that, when we hover on top of it, we can also see other information like how much time or nearly how much time it took and what caused this render. Why did this render? We can see that for this router, the state changed, called the location state changed. So if we go down further to the components that we are interested, which is the end user interface, when we click on that, we can see that this component rendered because location and match changed. So these are specifically props sent by the React router DOM. And it makes sense for the end user interface component to render when these props are changed. Because when we click on an article, the corresponding slug in the URL also gets changed. So currently, this is the article that we are dealing with. Therefore, the slug in the URL is related to the article. So if we click on, say, another article, let's click on this one, the first one. So if we click on that, you can see that the slug also has changed. And this is being done by React Router DOM. Now moving further, end user interface looks fine. There is nothing wrong over there. Then the end user interface again invokes React Router DOM switch and another route is being rendered. And the route provider goes here, component, and the preview component. When we click on that, the first thing that we see over here is that this is the first time the component rendered. But that doesn't make any sense, right? Because we were already in the end user interface and the preview was rendered, right? Because the preview component is within the end user interface component and thus it was already rendered. When we click on another article, it needn't get rendered as if it's getting rendered for the first time. So this seems a bit off. So somehow this particular preview component is getting re-rendered. And if we go down further, we can see that this preview component again got rendered because hook number 3 changed. So if we go through the component definition, we can see which is the third hook and why exactly it changed. Hook 1 changed, hook 2 changed, hook 3 and 4 changed. So there are several re-rendering happening over here, but this one seems to be the most crucial one, or the one that we should definitely fix. This is the first time the component re-rendered or rendered. That doesn't seem right. So let us see why this might have happened. So while just going through the graph itself, I believe we can get an idea of why this preview component might have got re-rendered. So if we look at the top, the component above preview, we can see it's called component, which is a vague name. I don't think we would have named a component with the name of component. So this is something to look into, but this is present in our application. But again, when we go top, we can see it's part of the router.provider. So this gives me an idea like where I have to look into. I think we should probably look into how React router DOM renders this component when the particular route has been matched. So let us actually look into that. So when we open up the EUI component, which is rendering the preview component, which is like the parent, UI is the parent of the preview, we can see that there is a route there are two routes actually which renders preview component. But both those routes have this prop called component and it's taking in a callback function which returns a React node called preview. So at the first look, this may not seem that harmful, but if we go through the React router doc, we can see that for the component prop, when we use this component, it underneath the hood, it uses React.create element to create a new React element from the given component. So here they have explicitly mentioned that if we provide an inline function to the component prop, then we will be creating a new component on every render. And at the end, they have explicitly mentioned how exactly the component should be passed if we are intending to use an inline function. When using an inline function for inline rendering, use the render prop or the children prop. So that gives us an idea about how to fix this issue. Now let's go back to the code and see what exactly we need to do over here. here we could replace this component or the component probe with the render probe, but I don't see any point for using the render probe over here because we are not passing any other probes to the preview component, right? So it's just a matter of removing these inline functions and keeping it as just preview. And here we should be using render. Okay. Now if we look in our UI, after refreshing the page, if we go ahead and click on another article, you can see that the left sidebar is not getting closed. Yet we are able to see the necessary information of the selected article as preview, which means that we have solved the issue at hand. But before concluding anything, let's also verify that the way by which we have actually solved is actually the right way. So in order to verify that, let's actually once again profile. Let's go to the profiling. Yeah, it's already having an article selected. So let's actually start profiling, then click on another article, then stop profiling. Now we get the graph again. EUI, same thing. What we are interested is in the preview. So as you can see, the number of renderings for the preview component has been, I think, reduced to 2 instead of previously it was like 5, right? So I think this is good enough for now. There are other issues that we should be looking into why there are 2 rendering that's happening over here, but that's a case for later. There are some useful options which the React Developer Tools provides us, and we can configure them via the settings, which can be accessed by clicking on this settings gear icon. So when we click on that, we see several tabs, and in the general tab, this checkbox, highlight updates when components render. We should be turning that on or checking that. The benefit is that if we have opened the inspector, the browser inspector, and if we are viewing or interacting with the page, whenever we perform some interaction, let's say we click on an article, then we can see exactly which all parts in the UI is getting rendered. So watch closely. If I click on another article, the highlighting will be shown using green borders. See? So here, if we look closely, we can see that the article view, the left sidebar, and also this header is getting rendered. But I wonder why this header is getting rendered when we just change the article. It doesn't make sense because this is actually hard-coded, right? So this shouldn't be getting rendered. So that's the use case of the highlighting. It helps us in understanding what exactly is getting rendered by looking in the UI itself. Another option that we should be turning on is this one. Under the Profiler tab, there is a record why each component rendered while profiling. So this provides us the insights into why exactly each of the component had rendered. So to give an example, so this end user interface component, why did this render this part, right? This is actually helpful. We can know exactly why the component got rendered in the first place. So yeah, I would suggest keeping this option checked. In order to learn more about the features of the React DevTools and especially the profiler, you can visit React DevTools tutorial.versal.app, and there are several cases presented over here, and you can go through each and every one of them and try it out live over here in this playground. Now coming back to the application, although we have resolved the issue with the sidebar, there is one another issue that's persisting. So let's say we take any random category and any random article, and if we copy the link or the URL to that article and open that link in a page, we, when in a new window, we are getting redirected to some other article. So here I had selected the link to this particular article, but when I pasted it, I got redirected to this particular article. So that also doesn't seem right. So here also we need to start with our intuition. So from the UI, it's not a case of re-rendering. It's some other issue for which we will have to look into the code itself. So when we look into the code in the preview component, we can see that there is an use effect which runs when the slug or the articles change. So here there is a logic to push another route called /public/articles of zero.slug, which means that this particular line might be the one that's causing the issue. So when does this particular statement get executed? It gets executed when there is no slug and if the article's length is greater than 0. So from my understanding, this check for not of slug is existing because of this case. So previously we saw that whenever we are visiting /public or /public with a slug, we are getting redirected to the preview. So in this case, there won't be any slug. So in this case, when we just give route as /public, we should be showing the list of articles and categories, and we should be selecting the first article, be it in any category. I believe it will be in the first category. So the first article in the first category should be selected and it should be shown if there is no slug. I believe that's what's happening here. But the problem is that this not of slug is not working as intended. Otherwise, this part shouldn't get executed, right? So how do we go on about debugging this? We could go along the path where we add countless console log statements and log everything into the console and see what exactly is going wrong. But that's not a very scalable debugging methodology. More than that, it's so much time consuming. We have to add the console log statement, then we have to remove it, so on and so forth. Another way of doing the same thing is by using a debugger statement. So a debugger statement invokes any of the available debuggers we have attached to our application. So in this case, we need to attach a particular debugger to VS Code so that we can debug the application right here from VS Code itself. So let us see how we can do that. So let's start by opening up the command palette, and here we should search for the option select and start debugging. So when we click on that, we can see several options over here. We should go to add configuration, and it will open up the existing launch.json file if it exists within your application, or it will prompt us to create a new one. So let us actually create a new one. So I have actually deleted the launch configuration, and let's actually do it from scratch once again. You can select and start debugging, go to add configuration. Yeah, now from here we should choose the web app Chrome. So I am using Google Chrome. Thus I'll be showing you how to debug this using the web app Chrome debugger. So let's select that, and a launch.json file will be generated within the .vs Code folder. Here we should update the URL and change the port to whatever port the server is running in. So in our case, given that we are using a Rails application which uses React views with the help of Webpacker, and since this Rails server runs at the port 3000, we should change it to 3000 over here. Now that's done. Now we have got everything set up. Now let's again open up the command palette and we need to jump into run and debug. Yeah, show run and debug. So when we open that, we can see a left sidebar where we can see the variables, words, call stack, etc. So here you can see an icon to launch Chrome against localhost. Let's click on that. Yeah, this opens the application. Let's navigate to the public view. And here we can see the public page for the knowledge base. So as you can see, even though we visited this particular page or this particular component got rendered, nothing happened. We didn't get any debugging information. That is because we haven't added the debugger statement yet. So let us add that. I think it's better to debug this over here itself where we are getting the slug. So let's start from there. Now, as you can see, when the web page is refreshed, the execution stops at this particular debugger statement. It doesn't go past this particular debugger statement until we continue over here or step over or stop the debugging process altogether. So let's actually try and see what all information is provided to us. We can see that the local variables are shown over here, and then there are the closures, then there are global variables. We are interested in the local variables at the moment because slug is a local variable. So as you can see, the value of slug over here is this particular string, and this is the string which we are given in the URL. So all this looks fine to me. Let's continue. Now several variables are getting updated over here. We can see it highlighted in the left sidebar. Now categories have been fetched. Articles fetched. A particular article state has been set. Is loading is false. Continue. Now things are over and we are seeing the page. Everything looks fine. But now let's actually open another. Okay, that's not what I meant to do. So I just need to copy the URL of this article and let's open it as if we are opening it for the first time in an incognito window. So when we do that, several things. We should keep track of both the UI as well as the our debugger window in order to gain more insights. So as you can see, when I pasted in the URL changed into just /public. It was an URL which had a slug, but now it is just /public. So that raises a question: why exactly was this changed to /public? Okay. Now, if we go to the debug console, we can see that the slug is undefined, which makes sense because right now this is /public. So see, this has helped us in understanding that somehow whenever we paste an URL, it's getting changed into /public if it has a slug. But this problem doesn't exist if we say open up this page. Okay, let's actually continue with it. Let me actually stop the debugging and let's start it once again just to show what I'm trying to say. Let's preview it. Yeah, so now if we go to another article, this issue doesn't exist. This one only exists when we are getting routed to this particular URL from the start. Meaning once we go through the whole, let's say, hierarchy of components, which means that we should be looking into other components or parent components from where we get the slug. So let us do exactly that. Let us look into the component which actually renders this preview component. So this EUI component is what renders this preview component. So here at the first looks, the routes look fine to me, but we can't jump into a conclusion yet. Let's also see what component renders this EUI component. So if we go to the app.jsx, we can see that this EUI component is getting rendered by the app component. Now let's go back to EUI. Let's actually see what exactly is the slug that we are getting over here. Meaning when we paste the URL with a slug, it first hits the app.jsx file, right? Then it gets rendered, the UI gets rendered. So ideally here also we should be catching the slug because this path is not an exact path, meaning we haven't passed in the exact keyword over here, which means that this particular route will match /public or /public/ anything, right? Both will be matched. So given that both will be matched, here also we should be able to access the slug. So let us see whether we are able to access that slug. So in order to debug this further, I just added another debugger over here in the induce interface component, and I just got the location, which is a hook that React router DOM provides us. So as you can see, when we open a particular URL with a slug, we are getting the path name, which is correct. Okay. Till now it's okay. So when we continue further, what is happening? Redirect to login is false, okay, which is fine. But then suddenly we are getting redirected to the public/login page. That doesn't seem right because here redirect to login is false, but still we are getting redirected to the login page. So if we go down further and look into the routes, we can see here that there is a redirection logic over here. And it says that if the current user is not logged in, then redirect to the login page. But as per the business logic over here, there is one more criteria in order to make a judgment on whether we should redirect to the login page or not. So here we also need to use this particular state called redirect to login, and then only redirect to the login page. So now let us actually paste in this URL once again. We see that the router location is correct. Now if we continue, redirect to login is okay. Now if we continue, things worked. Now we can see that we have opened up the particular article corresponding to the slug. But if you look closely, now there is also another issue. The left sidebar is not expanded right now. We are not able to see the specific category expanded for this corresponding to this particular article. That is another issue we should fix, and we can fix it the same way that we did right now using the debugger statements. So after using the debugger statements and fixing some of the dangling issues here and there within the components, now if we open up the page, we can see that when the slug is given, we are seeing the preview of that particular article, as well as in the left sidebar, that particular category and the article within it is being opened up. More than that, we can go navigate through the articles without any issue at all. More than that, using these debugger statements and revamping or refactoring our code helps us in making it better. So if you remember previously when we had profiled, there were too many re-renderings happening for the preview component, right? So let's actually see how it looks like right now. So if we open an article, then stop profiling, you can see that the components are getting rendered, but most of the yellow colored renderings are right now less, which means that the time consuming rendering has been reduced. And more than that, if we click on the preview component, we can see that this is only getting rendered once. So yeah, this is how we can effectively use the debugging and profiling tools with a React code base. And in this video, we were specifically talking about debugging React code from within a Rails application. Thank you.